studies out. And we're all getting that aha moment. Great.
And I liked somebody in our group said, when you're not afraid of it anymore, you can look at it and not be afraid of it.
Or when you're eager to share it with others, it's something that, a new concept or something that you want to talk about more and share with someone else.
Absolutely. So, go ahead. Failure. Oh, I think when students realize, when we can express that failure, when we can build in that failure is a part of the learning process, when students finally have that aha moment that failure is something we can move forward from, we can build forward, I think we've done something as a teacher.
And even when you're teaching it or you do have that real life application, sometimes that's when you face the failure. I know that there's things I've taught that I'm like, oh, that was completely wrong. And I learned from that, I never teach it the same way again. Or the real life, you realize, oh, that's why we don't do it this way because X, Y, and Z.
I was going to say, stats, I'm not sure I'll ever not be afraid of it.
Yeah.
But I got through it because I failed plenty of times going forward through it. I think the why is what we hit on. When we let our students realize there's a why behind why we're learning it, that there's real life relevance in it, there's a reason they're going to learn it. All of this, that we show them where it transfers into their real life experience, the why, that there's a relevance. I think it really comes down to those 3 words. That we have to make sure that we are conveying that as professors into oftentimes they're not going to see that unless we convey it. So those are the 3 things that we need to make sure that we are conveying through their assessments. Oftentimes, it comes down to the fact that if we don't have assessments that show these things, they're not going to see it. So oftentimes it comes down to crafting our assessments to show them these things, how it's relevant, what is the why behind it, how it transfers into these occupations, how it transfers into the knowledge base they need to know for these things they're going into or are interested in. So oftentimes it may take opening up to having options for them to say, here's what I know, here's what you need to show me, then giving some student choice. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we be innovative in the fact? Sorry. So how are we innovative in the fact that we identify an objective and then allow our students to show us what they know and allow some interest-based choice? So when we talk about traditional versus authentic, I heard a lot of what you were talking about. So let's look at these together. So traditional, I'm going to be selecting what response they need to give me. I'm going to be, sometimes the responses are contrived. It's going to be more recall, recognition in approach. They're going to be more teacher structured, and it's going to be indirect evidence. In authentic, it's going to be more of them performing that task, a real life experience. Maybe them constructing that application. I've heard a lot of that. When I can teach it, when I can do it, when I'm able to be creative and that type of thing. It's going to be student structured. They're going to be able to see that relevance in it. And it's going to be direct evidence of it, that creating. Now let me be real clear here. I am one of those people, and I will stand on a soapbox and say it. I truly believe that there is a time and a place for traditional assessment and non-traditional authentic assessment. My husband is a nurse. There are times when he has to know how you dose. That's a very direct, what kind of medicines there are, what they serve, blah, blah, blah. Those are very recall oriented. Our students need to know that. Bones, what's the bone? Let's direct it. But there's also times when we need to know scenarios, how we plan it. Those are very non-traditional, authentic assessments. There's a time and a place for both of them. So it's not about traditional or authentic. It's about knowing what assessment at the right time.
So we're gonna have you guys play a little game here of whether it's authentic or not. And I'm going to read, we should have time, we'll have 4 different scenarios. And I want you to look at these characteristics, which you'll have on your paper in front of you because they'll disappear on the screen. And when you think through the scenario, talk to the person next to you and decide whether it's authentic or not and try to identify the characteristics from it. So scenario number 1, students watch and discuss a film on the Holocaust. They read Night by, I just looked this up, Elie
Wiesel?
Wiesel.
Weasel?
Wiesel?
Weasel.
Oh, I looked at 3 different
We
pronunciations.
did.
And they were all different. And write a personal response to the author. They then engage in a classroom discussion on human behavior and on the tendencies that supported fascism and Nazism. Students read The Wave by Todd Strasser, or examine current data on extremist groups. They write an editorial on the extent to which the rights of such groups should be protected. Finally, among the class, they select 2 or 3 of the best editorials and submit them to local newspaper. So pair up with who you guys talked to about what you learned. Look at the characteristics and see what you can identify as authentic or not. And then we'll vote here in a minute.
Responding.
Yes, thumbs up if it's authentic, thumbs down if it's not. Okay.
And then be ready to support your answer. Okay.
All right, what do y'all think?
60-40 split. 60-40 split. Halfway. Okay, so it looks like majority think it's authentic. Let's start with this back group since you guys had your 60-40 split. What elements of it did you see that were authentic? We'll start with that first.
Well, I think the whole top, to me, the whole top piece, that first paragraph.
So writing a personal response.
And I had a reverse. I thought the writing, the personal response, reading and writing was the traditional, and then submitting to the local newspaper, it's not disappearing, was maybe more of the authentic.
Yeah, I can see that too.
I can see both.
Yeah.
Because he was talking about analyzing real-time data.
And writing to somebody, so I believe he has passed away, so.
Yeah.
But if it was a living author, that would make it more authentic, that maybe they could get a response from that. What are other elements of authentic assessment that some of the other groups saw?
Well, it takes steps. So you have, first you're getting the evidence of what happened during the Holocaust. And then you're taking it, integrating it, and reprocessing it in order to give a personal response. The next step is that you're engaging in classroom discussion and again, taking the evidence from what Havizu had proposed. And then again, reprocessing that and listening to what other people have to say about it. So again, that's a less than traditional. And then with the new information on the current political climates with extremist groups, you can then apply the knowledge from that, what happened during the Holocaust, what happened in Nazi Germany. You then take that, apply it to how is this similar to the extremist groups here in the United States and other parts of the world. And then
Think about where you are in Bloom's on that.
right,
Yes.
so that's in the final step of then taking it and again reprocessing it in your own words, taking those first 3 steps, integrating it, and coming out with a product.
Yes, multiple steps. This is a huge project. This is not a one-time class thing, or even each of these steps are probably not a one and done thing that you do in class. That it's process over the semester.
And then the final thing, when you're choosing editorials and you're submitting to a local newspaper, there's a big public exhibition piece to that. And I think anytime you're making things public, you're creating that and making things public, there's a whole nother authenticity piece and accountability piece to that.
That somebody's actually gonna read this and call me out if it's wrong, and it's not just gonna be my professor. Scenario number 2. Following a storm in the area, a group of 4th grade students go to the beach to observe the problems associated with beach erosion. They read fiction and nonfiction works related to coastal environments. They then develop a class website on the problems associated with beach erosion and on the actions that the community can take to prevent them. So this is a 4th grade example. She teaches in education. Some of you guys might also teach in K-12. So think about this, look at your characteristics and decide, is this traditional or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have to think of that. It's not just. And it's the real life. They're building a website. Real life. Direct evidence.
So that
A lot of it but that's not really applied
Okay, now. Yeah, figure it out. So it's like, right?
You guys get it, right?
It's the LLC one on the other side.
Yeah, but
There's also.
Is it just the process of creating it, or?
Yeah.
Are they actually trying to?
You gotta do those work. You gotta be very rough. Yeah. What is?
You guys decided back?
Yeah.
60-40 now.
I know, right?
Okay, we'll start around this side. What did you guys think, authentic or not? Authentic? Or back around with you guys?
Yeah, no, more like.
Split? Okay, what about it makes it authentic?
They're actually going to the beach and they're getting involved in what's actually going on in their community.
So they're seeing the real life exhibit of this. So I actually did something similar to this in my earth science class in college. We actually go and look at rocks and water erosion, so it could be applicable for simplified, but what was something that maybe was traditional that they're on the back where you guys were iffy?
Well, go ahead, what were you saying? Well, what I said earlier, as far as solutions go that they are proposing, how specific are they getting to their own community, or is it going to be more of a recall recognition from what they've read?
That's your,
Is anyone looking at their website? Are they anything to, I mean, is it just one of those random things out there that exists?
yeah. So if it was 4th graders, they probably, a lot of people probably aren't reading it, but maybe if they were college students, they were presenting maybe a science exhibition or something like that for their school, it might be
A little bit
higher
more,
level
right.
accountability for what they are writing. And it probably depends on what the prompts and what the professor is asking them to do on that website that would make it higher order thinking instead of recall recognition from what they read.
We thought if their parents Facebook about it and send people that direction, then that might help.
More information needed.
I think the fiction, nonfiction piece is kind of tricky. It's not necessarily real life in a sense. And then Rob brought up a good point again about 4th grade, how much of that is going to be teacher structured because of these.
But that, I mean, that's kind of part of when you're teaching young kids, is you can't just let them loose.
Right.
They would like that, trust me, they try.
But something like this, even at college age, we can't expect just throw them into
Unless you've taught them how
a
to do it.
scenario where they can just choose and come up with their own project. maybe this is something that could be used to structure to get to a further.
Yeah, so it's kind of
It could be a middle ground to get them started on something and choosing and putting something out there publicly before they get to write into an editorial to a newspaper or something like that. Scenario number 3, anatomy and physiology students are asked to identify specific organs and match them to their biological systems on an exam. Students use a list of terms and a diagram to label their responses. Students are provided an answer key to assess the peer's diagram and discuss corrections in a discussion board. Some immediate answers to that. Talk quickly and then we'll come back. I think we have consensus. What makes this traditional?
listing terms, there's an exam, there's a diagram. I mean, it's what you need to learn when you're trying to do something like that, or
When
teaching.
the students turn this in and the professor grades it, or maybe the professor didn't grade it because he or she gave them an answer key, what would the professor expect?
Right answers.
Right or wrong, and they should all look pretty similar, especially if they give them the exam. So we call that an assignment. It's about the same thing from every student. They just show that they follow directions. What could you do to tweak this to make it more authentic? Because as Amy said, her husband's a nurse. I would like the nurse to be able to do this and identify these things before they treat me. So it's important.
Like choose a specific organ to like learn more about? I don't know.
I have them do comparative physiology, looking at other species and looking how their organs function and our organs function, and see where the similarities and dissimilarities are, and make them think about that.
It probably also depends if this is a gen ed class or something specific to biology or health. Yep, pre-med or nursing or something like that. You might have them do something relevant to what their major is. Any other ideas of what you can tweak about this?
Maybe use your own body in your life.
I mean, now, and
You know what I mean, but like, here is whatever, try stuff.
Here's my bladder.
Yeah, here's one of my bladders looking at it, I don't know.
Is there something practical they can do with this to get some more hands-on experience with something like maybe it is using anatomy equipment or a dummy doll in a clinic or something like that? Last scenario. Students identify and conduct research on selected civil rights issues that can be addressed at the local level. They conduct extensive research on the availability of existing children's literature on those issues. They meet with a children's book publisher to discuss the specific publication demands for producing and marketing children's literature. They write a children's book on their civil rights issue and test market it in a school. They revise their book based on their test marketing and then submit it to a children's book publisher. Authentic or not? And we do graduate work is authentic?
Yeah.
I don't know, I find pretty inauthentic graduate assessment.
Here's what I love that most of you touched on during this. It's anything that you make at this level that we got to authentic. Some of you are like, well, this is 80-20. This is whatever. Well, what you want out of any authentic assessment is that they have to grab onto that stuff that they have to recall and regurgitate to you. You have to build that in there because they shouldn't be able to do the authentic assessment without gaining that knowledge along the way. Does that make sense? So, I mean, that's the basis of like any project-based learning, which basically, whether you are kindergarten through higher ed, graduate education, I mean, PBL is getting all the way through higher ed now. So whether they are K through 20, 24, 30, we need to design authentic assessment so that when you have designed that, they are grabbing that stuff that you would normally test, ABCD, or diagram, or regurgitate this to me, say it back to me, write me an essay on this. You have to design the instructions or design the assessment that at some point you're going to have those elements in it. And notice none of these are one-step processes. So it may be that throughout the course, there are steps and check-ins. So by the end of the course, they have created this. So that's how we want you to think about it. We want you to see the fact that there are some things that are traditional. Remember, it's about right time, right place. No good or bad, right time, right place. So if we need them to grab that regurgitation, we need them to grab that basic knowledge because they couldn't do step D without it, then they need to grab it. Because next time they're gonna have to apply it. And then they need to grab because they're gonna have to apply. So yes, it might be 80-20, it might be 60-40. And that's really what we wanted you to see. That you're gonna bounce back and forth on this sheet. And really, it's about right time, right place. But in the end, you're gonna have this product, hopefully, that's authentic. That they're going to have seen the relevance about this master portfolio or project or book they created. But at some point, there were these traditional elements in it. Does that make sense? So let us show you some that we have going on in here.
So you might be having the question, how do I assess this? If I'm getting all these different products back from my students, how can I assess this? So what we've done is we've given you some examples, which is the QR code on the handout should lead you to this open Canvas course. We use Canvas at NNU, so we literally took our examples and put them in here. So you can come in here, feel free to steal anything in here and adjust it for your own content areas. So we have 3 different projects that we each do in our classes that we've shared. And so the first one I'm going to go through is I teach History of American Culture. It's an upper division general ed American history course. So I have very few history majors in this class. Most of them are non-history majors. And the traditional assessment for this class or cumulative project was a 15-page research paper. And they could pick what topic of American culture they wanted to write on. So there was some personalization, but I really don't care to grade 15-page papers with people who are not history majors. If they were history majors and they really need to build up that research skills, then that would be different. And so I changed this assessment into a portfolio project, and they still have to do research. They still have to write. They have to learn some other soft skills in order to do it, but it gives them some variety, that they have some choice in how they present the different pieces of the portfolio. And then they also get to personalize it to research what they're interested in. So while they're learning about all these themes in American culture that they may not be interested in, this is an area where they have some freedom in that. So overall, they have 5 artifacts. They have a timeline. They analyze a primary document related to their topic. They have a visual collection. So how do we present culture visually? They do write a short paper, which I tell them is 2 to 3 pages max. And then they do a video that they kind of present their portfolio to me, and they do put it publicly. They don't send it out to people, so maybe this isn't quite on the edge of authentic because they don't publish it anywhere. And they do it throughout. This is a 7-week online course, and they do it within that 7 weeks. And I have different checkpoints for them. So in here, I have it about the project, and then I give you an example for when they turn things in throughout the semester. And then they also have a presentation portfolio rubric that I tell them this is layout. As long as you have these elements, I don't care how you present them. This is just the type of things that I want to see in there. So they have some freedom of how it looks at the end. I have 2 examples. This first one was a student who he connected the use of film and activism. So he took examples of American history of where actors or directors use their platform of being a celebrity to push forward their activist agenda, and then he tied it to more current events. So he was able to see how the influence of film and that celebrity culture was able to give them a platform for their purpose. So each of these things are one of those different artifacts. They use Microsoft Sway, which is a free Microsoft product. You don't have to have an Office 365 account to use it, that he built together all his different portfolio things. The other example I have in here is a student who had flunked American history twice before, and even flunked one because of some plagiarism issues. He is an international student and really did not grasp what was plagiarism or not. And so I was a little nervous to have him in my class because I was the director that had to kick him out of one of the other classes. And so I had my eye on him. And he did a history of hip hop and American culture. And it was something he was really interested in, something I knew nothing about. And so he was excited that he got to teach his professor about it. And he did a phenomenal job. And this was so unique of a project that there's no way he could have cheated on it, because there isn't something out there like that he could just copy and paste over. And so he did, this is his overview video. Here's his timeline of different important pieces of hip hop culture in America, or landmarks. He found primary sources on this topic. He had to work with our librarian for a little bit on that. And he did a great job with it. And it's something that if I had just given him a research paper, he probably would have repeated the same thing that he had done in the other classes.
I tell professors all the time, one of the biggest ways to combat plagiarism is through crafting your assessments. Let them have their interests, and craft your assessments so it's harder to plagiarize.
Let's go back to yours, Amy.
So this is a piece of a module. I teach on global education. A lot of times my graduate master students come to me and they have no idea what global education is. In fact, one of my first questions in my module is, right now, without looking forward, tell me what global education is. And I just want them thinking. You know, it's kind of that, if I were to ask them, if I had them sitting, because I'm completely online, it's one of those things I would do as an anticipatory set. I want to get their brains going. So it's that first thing of building. I need them to have that regurgitation, you know? I need them to start building. So I kind of said, here's what I wanted you to know first. When you teach this way, you have to be crystal clear as a professor of what your student objective is. Because just like Bethany just stated to you, no student artifact to you is going to look exactly the same. But your rubric is very clear about what you're looking for. And that rubric is very clear. So it's not harder to grade. So don't get me wrong, because you can look at any one of your artifacts and say, did they show me this? Did they show me this? Because your objective is the same. So you have to be clear on that. So I wanted them to find out what global education is. What are the tenets of global education? What are the mindfulness of a teacher in global education? So this is kind of what my module looks like that they have to go through. So they're learning. I've put together kind of a module on what is it? Lots of resources, different things for them to read. What does ISTE say about it? What did some of the top educators say about it? Experts. So they're building. What's the pushback on global education? Global citizenship. What is there a difference between those things? Maybe they've heard of that. They have different book chapters that were required. Read those. So doing lots of different traditional things, right? Right things, right time. So now they have to make an infographic. They're doing an infographic. Well, first, some of my students don't even know what an infographic is. So I have to build that background. So we have a video on what makes a good infographic. Lots of them have seen one because infographics are huge right now. So they're building here's my rubric on it. Tells them exactly what they need to do in an infographic. They'll see this same, it's a little different, but they'll see a rubric on an infographic twice during this course.
because I'm trying to build their 21st century skills, because our master's program is not only on curriculum and instruction, but also innovation. So in innovation and doing different 21st century skills is embedded throughout their program. So once again, very clear on what they need, and then they have to create it. So building background, and here's the student sample. So they went from not knowing what global education was to having to build their background. I've told them things like, what are the tenets? Why is it important to 21st century learners? Those are different things they had to answer on their infographic. But every single one of my students turned in something that looked completely different. An infographic, but completely different. So this is one way that you can let them have some choice and application in what they do. One more I want to show you real quickly. Let me pop back out. I teach a leadership class. And although we teach leadership and we read a class together, they are assigned a leadership book on their own. And they are assigned to teach that book through a professional development to their school, their staff, sometime during the course of our class. So what they do is they have to take the book, and I loved when you said, somebody over here said, I know it when I can teach it. I know it when I can teach it. I believe that wholeheartedly. And that's exactly where the spirit of this course came from, or this assignment came from. So they read the book. Well, I think reading a book is great, but now I want you to take that book and apply it to the context of your staff or your context of your, I have some people who come through my curriculum instruction who teach in a business, not necessarily a school. So now I want you to take that leadership book and I want you to apply it to your business. How is this going to help your people, your employees? So what they do is they sign up for the project. They then make a PD depending on whatever platform. So they have to have interactives in it. Here's all of the guidelines for this. I supply interactive for the Google sites. They make it in a Google site. But I supply different interactive ideas, tutorials. They have different, like this one is the requirements for it. Here's the rubric for it. Uh-oh. Oh, it's because I'm not on there. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. I didn't think about that.
So is this for an online course?
Mm-hmm. But I've done it in my undergrad face-to-face course as well.
Will go up on your watch.
Oh, yes, it will.
Go back to Chrome at the bottom. There it goes.
Okay, so here is one example. So they read influencer. And so this is what they turn into me. They turn in a website, and you can see that it has different areas. And they have to, what it is, these are asynchronous. So they planned this one to be one that they didn't have to meet as a staff, but each person could do this on their own time. Each teacher could do this as their own time and their own rate, kind of as a book study throughout the year. So highlighting different areas of the book. Different interactives. If you've never used Edpuzzle, it's a great thing. You can put in a video, and you can stop them. They have to watch it. It stops them at different points. Ask them questions. They can't skip. So different things like that. It gives you a sense. But once again, just gives them some choice in how they create. This is authentic. It's public. They have to not only read the information, but they now have to apply it. How does this apply to my context?
Just one more. Oh, my word. Okay, I'll let you look at it. It'll come up for you. It is an open link. This is just barriers, I think, because it's EWI, I've been trying to get on campus. But they are open for you. But just one more thing. So now I want to ask you, we'll get back to we've given you a lot to think about, I hope. So now I want you to get back in your groups, and we're going to kind of ask you to go forward with a plan of action. Let me go back to our PowerPoint. Kind of think forward. We want you to think about a few things. What is an authentic assessment presented? Maybe today, or something that maybe has sparked an idea that wasn't presented today, but you think, oh, I can kind of tweak that and do this. That you could do in your class or your content area. Or maybe what is one takeaway or aha from today's session that you could take with you? Or maybe what are some more questions you have? Sometimes that's what happens to me in these sessions is I hear this and I think, what about this? So get in your groups and talk about maybe these 3 questions and look at the Canvas stuff that's opened up and maybe talk about these 3 things and we'll talk about it in just a second.
Sorry, I just literally did
I was, I know.
But I think also at board
that. 240 or 250, sorry.
These following those, make it look like this. Because I
But
it's meaningful.
so
It's not quite the same, they don't do video.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice. Yeah. I would do that. Ask a question. Oh, yeah. You get a lot of really good
We'll give you 1 more minute. So I try to say that things on my courses because teachers want to go out. I try to talk all sorts of things because really a lot of them are serious. Instead of always digital.
I would find clients that they
There's always work to
For teaching, I think, if you're teaching well, I was gonna say, I have some people I hear talk to like they haven't revamped their course in 5 years, and I think, and you're not teaching well. I revamp mine every single time.
Yep.
Yes, but there's little,
Yes, I can never teach it the same way
every
twice.
time. All right, I'll have you wrap up your sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more,
Any highlights from your conversation? Whether it was yours or something you heard? Oh. Okay, I'm gonna spill on you because I
Okay.
love what I heard you say.
What was that?
You said that I found out I'm doing some authentic things and that
Yeah.
excited you.
Yeah,
I love that. That reassurance that you're doing some things right is always good. So I love that. I love that.
So I had the opposite problem. I teach psychology, and I was saying, the problem with teaching psychology is everybody thinks they know so much about it when they don't. So I actually have to back them off, thinking, this doesn't apply what you think it does. And it's such an easy, I've been teaching this way for a long time. It's such an easy topic to be able to that until I start getting into neurotransmitters and parts of the brain. But even then, there are ways of doing that. But yeah, there's that balance of they need to have the foundational knowledge in order to know that how it's used, the vernacular in the non-psychological genre is not the same as what it is in psychology. So that's actually a different kind of challenge.
So in my portfolio projects, they turn in that in the last week. They also take a traditional history exam. So they do short answers vocab, they do short essays, long essays. They do something very traditional because there are some things that I'm assessing them on that are fundamental history class things. But then I also add that. So you can have both.
So one question that I'm kind of leaving with is how many of these like authentic learning projects can you fit in a semester or one class? Because for me, it's like I have like one big authentic learning project, but what do I do on a day-to-day basis? Like, are they getting as much out of it? Are there like small ways to incorporate authentic learning in your class like every day?
So I would say if you had maybe a 16-week, like a full semester, maybe pick 2 medium-sized ones. So they're not doing the same thing the entire time. That would likely get boring for them. Or on the day-to-day, you can help build up some of the soft skills that are required for this project. So maybe you're having them submit a smaller assignment using a platform that then they can use in that project. So they're building up those skills with different things that they can add to that project.
I was gonna say, that's a huge piece of that. So, okay, so as far as like an infographic, maybe it's creating a poster with Canva first, and you're going to introduce Canva first in a classroom thing on a project. And then later, you're going to say, hey, remember that poster we created in that new platform I taught you? Now, I want you to think about how you can create this in that, because now they're already exposed to it. We like to think of our students as pretty savvy on technology, and they are to an extent, but they are in some areas. We need to teach them how to be savvy educationally, if that makes sense. So don't automatically assume they have the skills to do something well educationally. There is some background you're going to need to do to expose them to different educational tools that are out there.
Another example, so in the portfolio, they have to analyze the primary source. The week before that, in the regular classroom work, they actually analyze the primary source, and I walk them through that step by step. So it could just be breaking down some of the smaller skills that they need to be able to do that project, and then giving them lower stakes assignments on those things.
Plan backwards.
Yes.
That's what I say when you do something like this. Take what you want them to do and then do that backwards design.
Break it down into smaller pieces.
What do they need to know before that? I would say, so that web design that they did, that was in an 8-week course, because I mean, graduate ed, they take one 8-week course, an 8-week course. That was due week 6 on top of other stuff that they were doing. But I mean, graduate ed is a different beast than your traditional ed. My students in trad, in education, traditional ed, my undergraduate, they create a portfolio and they're adding pieces over a 16-week course, but it's that portfolio that's due at the end of the 16 weeks. And they create that portfolio, but there's different pieces that we're adding to that. And I would say there's 8 pieces to that, but one's a lesson plan. So they're not all huge. But there maybe is a mindset video that is, there's a mindset video that has different elements to it of why mindset is important. Growth mindset is important to 21st century learners, how I exhibit that as a teacher, how I get my students to exhibit that as, what I do to have my students exhibit that through their work, you know, like some policies and procedures I have in my classroom. And that's a video I specifically ask them to create. So that one takes a little longer. So there's some big things and little things, but there's 8 different things that they do in that portfolio. But it's intentionally built in there over a 16-week class. And then by the end, there shouldn't be anything huge for them to do if they have been doing it over. And that becomes a professional portfolio that they can then give to administrators and stuff as they go out and get hired.
I think we're out of time, so we want to respect the time to get to the next session. On the back here, we've given a list of platforms that if you want to mix up how they present and demonstrate that they're learning for you. We found out one of them, Recap, is now called Synthesize. So if you want to write that, jot that down next to Recap so you remember them. Most of these are either interactive where students can discuss and create together, or a presentation tool that they can present what they're learning.
If you'll leave our signs for us, I now have arthritis in my hand, make noise. So if you can leave those for us, we're going to be using them for a fall people with our professors at NNU, but you're welcome to take the handouts. Thank you very much.